How did the Winchester family get their start? It's an interesting question, and one that some would say is better left unanswered. Join us today as we look at the dark legacy of the Winchesters and how this family was cursed for all eternity. Welcome back to the channel. When most people hear the name Winchester, they think of the famous firearm brand. But those who are well versed in the lore of supernatural creatures may know of another Winchester of Sam and Dean, two monster hunting brothers who travel the country fighting the forces of darkness. They fight everything from ghosts to demons to shapeshifters and everything else that goes bump in the night. While the brothers do hunt monsters, they themselves are not monsters. In fact, they're just normal human beings who have been trained to fight in the war of good versus evil. Well, normal human beings with super strength, speed, and senses, that is, thanks to their extensive training. While Sam and Dean were born into the life of monster hunting, it wasn't by choice. Their father, John, dragged them into the dangerous profession against their wishes. This led to many arguments between John and Dean in particular. But eventually, Dean came to accept his role. He even seemed to enjoy it at times. But where did this acceptance come from? What caused Dean to go from hating the life of a hunter to embracing it? Some say it was because he knew there was no other option. Others say it was because he was destined to become a monster hunter, period. But there is another theory, one that has been passed around in the fandom since the show first aired, and it has to do with the origins of the Winchester name itself. According to legend, the name Winchester is synonymous with death and destruction. In fact, every Winchester ever born has been doomed to fail from the moment they drew their first breath. You might be thinking this sounds like a typical superhero origin story. Something about great power comes great responsibility. That sort of thing. But this couldn't be further from the truth. The Winchester curse isn't like that at all. In fact, it is much more dark and disturbing than anything involving radioactive spiders or angry gods. It all started in the early 1700s when a man named Elias Winchester was born. Unlike the Winchesters of today, Elias was born into wealth. His father was the owner of several successful companies and businesses. And when he died, he left all of his money to Elias, making him one of the richest men in the country. Elias could have spent his life enjoying the fruits of his labor, traveling the world, seeing exotic lands, and having countless sexual encounters with beautiful women. But he didn't. Instead, he chose to use his wealth to fund the works of a man named Enoch Noland, a local apothecary who was also dabbling in the dark arts. Now, if you've been keeping track of your biblical lore, you may recognize the name Enoch. If so, you are absolutely correct. Enoch was the great-great-grandfather of the biblical Cain, the very first murderer. After hearing this, you may be asking yourself, why on earth would Elias team up with a relative of Cain? To answer this question, let me pose another question to you. Have you ever met someone who had such a big dream that nothing seemed too big or too small to help them achieve said dream? Well, if the answer is yes, then you probably know what it's like to be around someone who is extremely narcissistic. And this was exactly what Elias was like. He funded Nolan's research into the occult, hoping that one day his friend would discover the secret to immortality. But this wasn't the only reason behind Elias's actions. As time went on, it became obvious that Nolan wasn't just intelligent. He was downright brilliant. He made discoveries and conducted experiments that many would consider unthinkable. And after years of hard work, he finally accomplished what Elias had wanted all along. He found the secret to eternal life. But here's where things get weird. You see, Nolan didn't want to live forever. In fact, he hated the idea of living forever. So instead of taking the secret to his grave, he decided to pass it down, passing the knowledge on to Elias, who was the only person he trusted enough to receive such power. In exchange for this gift, Elias promised Nolan that he would make sure his name was never forgotten. But this was easier said than done. After all, people tend to forget things over time, especially if they aren't directly affected by said thing. But Elias was a man of his word, and he made sure to honor his promise by doing whatever it took to keep the name Winchester alive. Unfortunately for him, however, he didn't have long to wait before the world found out about Nolan again. You see, The government didn't like the idea of someone conducting illegal and highly unethical experiments in the town of Hartford. And while they couldn't find any evidence of Nolan's crimes, they did find his house. And being the nosy government agents that they were, they decided to search the premises anyway. They found his journals and began reading through them, learning about the darker side of humanity. Then it happened. A group of men stumbled upon Nolan's laboratory, which was hidden beneath his home. There, they found notebooks detailing the secrets of life, death, and everything in between. And although they tried to keep it a secret, word got out and soon the entire town knew what had been going on behind closed doors. People were afraid. They were also angry. And when they heard that Elias was the one who had brought all of this darkness to their town, they wanted revenge. But Elias was prepared for this. He had known that something like this would happen eventually. So he had taken precautions beforehand. Before accepting the gift of knowledge, he had drawn up a contract with Nolan, and in it, he stipulated that if anything ever happened to him, Nolan would come back and claim his life. And so that's what happened. Nolan returned and claimed Elias's life, but he didn't stop there. He used the opportunity to take other lives as well, using them to fuel his experiments and research. Soon, the entire town was in danger. And if it weren't for the timely intervention of an unknown individual, the entire population could have been wiped out. That person managed to defeat Nolan, banishing him to another dimension where he could do no harm. But by this point, the damage was already done. The name Winchester was synonymous with death and destruction. And no matter how hard they tried, no Winchester would ever escape their dark legacy. In fact, each generation of Winchester would be doomed to repeat the mistakes of their ancestors. Each one would be tempted by the promise of power and immortality, and each one would succumb to temptation. But not everyone believes in the Winchester curse. Some say it was just a bunch of nonsense dreamed up by fans. Why would a show about monster hunting include a curse placed on the main character's family? Well, this is where things get complicated. You see, the show's creators never explicitly stated that the Winchesters were cursed. However, they also never outright denied it. Instead, they gave fans cryptic answers whenever the subject was brought up during interviews. And this only fueled the fire, leading to countless theories and debates among the fandom. Some say the curse is real, while others say it's just a product of the writer's imaginations. But one thing is for sure, whether or not the Winchester curse is real, it certainly seems that way sometimes. Each generation of Winchester is plagued by tragedy, death, and destruction. And it seems like no matter what they do, they can't escape their dark past. But maybe that's just part of being a hunter. Maybe it's the price they pay for fighting the good fight. But what do you think? Is the Winchester curse real, or is it just a product of the writer's imaginations? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to stay tuned for more videos. See you next time!